Thank you, Amit. Firstly, happy to be on the show. It's a very pertinent question that you ask. What are we planning to do over the next 3 to 6 or 9 months? Uh, when you plan, actually, normally you have some kind of clarity uh, in mind on timelines that you're working with. Firstly, I must apologize for the lack of light. I just lost a light in front of me, but you're going to have to bear with this. Coming back to your question, Amit, I believe we are in the biggest challenge we face is the fact that there is no clarity on when things will come back to normal. Whether it's the new normal or the old normal is debatable, but when things will come back. So when we talk about planning and strategy, you have to err on the side of caution. You have to be real. Okay. If you're asking me about if we have finite plans, the answer is no. What we're doing is we're thinking this through. To broadly answer your question, and I'm sure everyone else, all my peers and all the other companies are doing the same thing, we've actually got a strategy in place. What is that strategy? The strategy is a strategy of survival over the next swatch of time. Now, be that 3 or 6 or 9 months. To survive, there are certain few, facts and more importantly, figures that one needs to consider. If it is not going to come back in 3 to 6 to 9 months, as you are aware, costs do not stop. Okay. So one has to actually examine firstly, what are your reserves? And we have to be real about these things. Okay. It's not about just saying the right things or saying the most acceptable things. It will differ from company to company for obvious reasons. Different companies had different plans, had different strategies, had different levels of reserves, be it financial reserves or otherwise. So one has to look internally first as a company. There's no quick solution or general solution to all. One has to look internally as a company, figure what levels of sustainability you have within your company, and then create a strategy going forward. Very simply put, what are we doing? We've taken a long, hard look internally. We've figured out what are the reserves we have, assuming there is a zero income, as is the case right now. How long will we be able to sustain the costs that we have no option but to incur month on month? Obviously, there is a strategy to reduce costs as we go along, and we have a plan in place. Being a very people-centric business, we obviously value our people. And so we've actually a staggered plan in place. The first one is severe salary cuts. The next will be even more severe salary cuts, I suppose. Then, of course, there's the furlough, or the, the voluntary separation plan, which is, the 3 different steps that we are going to adopt. Parallelly, of course, what we're going to do is we're going to look at other costs aside of human cost and see how we can control that. That could be various aspects, right? That could be something as simple as your rent. Given the new work from home culture, is there a way actually of downsizing either the space you're using at the moment or bringing down the rent at the moment? And like rent, there are other few costs that we incur month on month, without getting into the micro details. So one needs to analyze your people cost. One needs to analyze your operational costs. And of course, going forward, one has to kind of inculcate a habit of thinking on as it is our business, kind of is a business of immediacy. We're going to up the ante. We're going to have to up the ante now and think on our feet as we go along. Broadly, I could get into micro mechanics, but broadly, it is about internally looking to see where your strengths lie, where your resources lie, and then planning the way forward. 3 to 6 to 9 months, is a really wide canvas. So, and we can discuss details as we go along. A quick answer is not possible to the question you just asked, Amit. Is there an alternate business, that we can do? Of course. But I do believe, and I want to be real about this, alternate businesses aside of digital are going to take a few years to hit fruition. Maybe even a year minimum to actually hit fruition. We are facing a problem at the other end of the spectrum. We are looking at survival at the moment. We are looking at sustainability at the moment. To quote you, you're saying, is there a new business aside of digital that we can look at now? Yes, of course. Is it going to help us at this point in time in the survival or sustainability game? I don't think so. As Roshan has very, I think with a lot of clarity said, we're not looking at a 3 to 6 to 9, Amit. We're looking, I believe, at a 12 to 18 month recovery process. Okay. So I really wish to be real about this. A new business has an incubation period. A new business, however smart it is, has an incubation period. So the answer is yes, one can look at new businesses, but what is the purpose? Is the purpose building a new vertical for for times to come? Yes, of course. So if that is the vision, yes, we must get into new verticals. I think Roshan touched on a couple of possibilities on what one can look at, where physical will meet digital. Okay, the purpose must still be the same. I agree. But if you're looking at, so there are two ways to look at it. One is overcoming the immediate challenges, and two is actually enhancing business purposes or creating new businesses. The answer to your question is yes, that of course it is possible for us to look at new businesses, but the caveat to that is it's going to take a fair while, as we all know. To set up a business is fine, but to take business to profitability, there is a time frame attached to it. So it doesn't help the current situation. I think most companies will be focusing on enhancing what they're already doing by marrying, as Roshan said earlier, physical to digital, or any other kind of nuances that you might add. There are various ways of actually taking what we do, which is, the business of people, the business of culture, the business of coming together to enhance business prospect. We can do it in many other ways, depending on who we are, depending on the strengths of the companies we're talking about. And I'd like to believe that this is subjective. There are certain companies that have talent in a certain area. There are certain companies that have talent in other areas. We, in fact, let's say have 4 different verticals. The mandated events vertical, the intellectual property vertical, we have a digital, vertical, or yeah, and we have a mice vertical. I don't need to say it, but we know there are one or two of these that are going to face long-term challenges. Mice, for instance, is going to take even longer than conventional events to come together. So to answer your question very simply, yes, one could look at new business. If you're asking me if that is our priority, I'd say no. We are focusing over the next 2 to 3 months on enhancing what we already do, seeing if there are newer ways to do it by adopting other mediums of engagement. At the end of the day, our business is being the creative glue between a supply and demand situation, being the creative glue between a brand and its prospecting and the consumer and its consumption patterns. That's our purpose. Now, we normally did that by bringing people together. Can we do that in the immediate by actually enhancing these experiences, or actually in the immediate creating newer experiences using online? So I'm really clear. The immediate answer to your question is yes, we can do new businesses. It's not going to help the current situation because of the turnaround time for a new business. But yes, when you say creating new businesses, we're talking about enhancing our immediate purpose in the current avatar. Yes, that's possible. I think we are holding on to straws here in a lot of ways. Allow me to be honest. Look, understand one thing, and if you can, if I sound like a pessimist in certain things, I say so be it. Okay. I do believe that there was a whole world of online developing. Okay. And they weren't waiting for a pandemic, or they weren't waiting for COVID. They were aggressively developing opportunities within the online world. Okay. And at a time like this, they will heighten their talents and their skills to address areas that even we would be addressing. Okay, Roshan mentioned a couple of really wonderful things that Geometry and Compass did recently. Make no mistake about one fact, that regular digital companies are also looking at it. Absolutely. I know I belong to a group that has huge strengths in the digital world. Okay, by way of 5 or 6 companies that focus purely on digital and have been for the last foreseeable past. Make no mistake about the fact that they will be focusing on growing at a time like this as well, because this is ideal growth time for them. Now keep that in mind. I do believe, and like I said earlier, for us to get into new areas must be done, will be done. How will we fare against those digital specialist agencies? is what your question is, I think we're going to have to work doubly hard to actually match up to existing offerings in the digital market, even in our space. A direct answer to your question, no easy run in the going forward. We are really going to have to up our game, because now we're not competing with competitors in the experiential world on ground. We're competing with competitors who've been doing digital activation for a lifetime in their company's life cycle. So tough times, yes, possible. We have to seriously up the game to stay relevant and to stay commercially viable. I think we need to get real with ourselves sometimes, and I certainly am a victim of this, and I want to call it. Like I was saying to Amit earlier in one of our chats, I think it was yesterday. Uh, I sometimes believe that we get so lost in the world of these possibilities that we don't spend enough time marrying it to the real world that we are living in. There are concepts and possibilities and more possibilities. The point is, how feasible are these possibilities, and what is the problem at hand at this point in time, and is it helping us at this point in time? So there are two different ways to look at things, and I think we need to do things in that manner. There is short term and there is long term possibilities. We first need to understand which are the short term and which are the long term, and we need to apply what is more necessary to us. I'm going back to what I said on the top of the discussion. If I have plenty of reserves, I will use a time like this to use my people to build newer businesses that marry well into my business, because the immediate is, so to speak, taken care of because of my reserves. There are many other companies that do not have reserves beyond a month or 2 or 3, and that's a normal. Okay, I'm not saying they are the exception, they are more the normal. That's the nature of our beast. They certainly need to be using this time to focus on the now. And if you focus on the now, then collaborations and potential of collaborations changes. I mean, there was a time, if you look back, when we didn't have the whole ton of creative people we have on board. We didn't have the whole ton of production people we had on board. And I can go on and on. What happens is, what we think in the process of growth is, we try and get we try and raise efficiency levels, and we have in-house. We create everything in-house because we thought, and maybe rightly, that we would be enhancing our offering and in the process enhancing our profitability. Today, we're thinking of exactly the opposite. A large thought doing the rounds is, do we need now to go back to being what is conventionally called a boutique agency and outsourcing, because that way you don't carry your costs with you through the year. Also, because specialities are increasing. There was a time when we were starting the agency, when we'd go to corporates and say, we are an event agency, and they turn around and say, why do I need an event agency? Not advertising, sorry, my admin department does all my events. There was a time 25 years ago, it's happened to me. Things have changed. Then people recognized that there was need for specialization in the experiential business. You were event manager at that time. Today, we stylishly say we are experiential marketers, which is true in a sense. But the larger point I'm making is that while we aggregated services under one roof, maybe it's time to now undo that and really figure out where your strength is, focus on what your strength is, and collaborate with people who have other strengths. That way, not one entity carries all of these costs in the going forward. Different people carry it. Collaboration is the way to go, irrespective of COVID or otherwise. I think we're living in a world of collab, and we need to accept that in moving forward. Like I said earlier, in the chat, firstly, I'd like for all of us to introspect and actually understand our call to action. Is it short term? Is it long term? Is it a combination of both? And if it's a combination of both, where is the priority? I don't want to decode it. I think I've said it twice in the discussion. So introspect and learn what your short term, targets are and what your long term targets are. And I don't speak only commercially, I speak otherwise as well. Two is, I'd like to really say this, because in a lot of the discussions I've had, both formal and informal, sometimes we tend to mix up the personal and the professional. And I really want to, and this, I suppose I'm addressing more the agency owners and people who are making decisions on behalf of their companies. I really want to say this, and this is something that has really caught my attention, not just over the recent past, but over the past as well. We sometimes tend to blur lines between who we are professionally and who we are personally. I know, I'll give you an example. For me personally, the culture of our company is exceedingly important. And in that culture, people drive who we are and what we do. So people are number one in our organization, and I suspect in many more organizations. That's that's the fact. And it's personally, emotionally very consuming for me and for my partners. Now, professionally, I need to examine as a company, what is it we can do to avoid the company from completely shutting down, right? I'm being dramatic. I have a strategy worked out. Part of that strategy might impact seriously, very seriously, my biggest asset, something that I love very dearly, which is our people. I need to understand the balance between being professionally true to the culture and my personal sentiment. And as CEO of a company, what am I called to do by way of making some clinical decisions? And I'm not saying do it harshly or do it badly. Anything can be done with the relevant dignity or the required dignity and integrity of intent. So the second thing I want to say is separate the personal from the professional and draw a balance when you're making your decisions. And I think thirdly, I'd like to really say, these are tough times. I think, many millions have said this before me. Nothing new there, but there are two. I saw a beautiful meme recently that read fear, that's been consuming all of us, FEAR. And fear can be handled in two ways. Fear can stand for forget everything and run, FEAR, or fear could stand for face everything and rise. I think obviously, it is about facing everything and rising above. It can be half full, it can be half empty. I think these are times, I think Roshan said it earlier, where we will all, or I think Vivek said it, where we will all come out newer people. We'll all come out with a high level of learning. What's that they say? I think Billy Ocean sang it in one of his songs. When the going gets tough, the tough get going. And I think this is boys to men time. This is boys to men time. We love to indulge ourselves and our companies. You know what, guys? This is boys to men time. This is the time to stand up and be counted, both individually and collectively as an industry, both personally and professionally. I know it sounds a bit of a speech, but honestly, that's my heartfelt sentiment.